Born as Zhang Rangfang in 1963 in Taipei, Teresa was no ordinary child. She came into the world with a silver spoon and a family legacy steeped in opulence, power, and refinement. Her maternal grandfather, Jiang Qinyu, was a formidable figure, a towering Taiwanese banker with roots in Confucian scholarship and calligraphy, a man who sat on the boards of major banks and art foundations alike. Her childhood was an education in luxury and legacy. She was taught to read Tang poetry before bedtime and wore silk pajamas hand-stitched by elderly Shanghainese seamstresses. Her mother was a reserved, icy beauty who married for status and bore children like they were expectations, not joys. Teresa, the eldest daughter, was raised to embody the ideals of feminine prestige. She attended elite Swiss boarding schools where she learned French, studied ballet, and absorbed the subtle cruelty of European aristocratic girls. Her life was curated like a museum, exquisite but untouched. She learned early on that she was not like other girls. She was to be admired, never questioned. In the 1980s, Teresa returned to Asia as a vision of cosmopolitan beauty. With her Eurasian features, perfect Mandarin, and fluent English, she was courted by fashion designers, diplomats' sons, and international playboys. But it wasn't just her looks that captivated, it was the aura she carried. She had the slow, deliberate cadence of someone who knew how much attention she commanded. She wore Chanel before it became commercial, sipped jasmine tea in silence, and wrote handwritten thank you notes on custom stationery. Her name appeared regularly in Tatler Asia and Harper's Bazaar Hong Kong. Her public image was tightly controlled, always poised, always perfect. But behind the pearl necklaces and black Mercedes sedans, Teresa craved more than social perfection. She wanted passion, glamour, risk. It was this hunger that led her into the orbit of Hong Kong's glittering entertainment world, where image was everything and reputations were currency. She first laid eyes on Chung Yat-long in 1988 during a gala in Hong Kong's Peninsula Hotel. He was Hong Kong's golden boy, a wildly successful cantopop singer with a boyish charm and a stage presence that made women swoon. Teresa was introduced to him through a producer friend and was instantly intrigued. Chung, for all his fame, was surprisingly soft-spoken off stage. Teresa, elegant and enigmatic, was unlike the giddy starlets who chased him. They had dinner the next night. Within weeks they were inseparable, traveling from Tokyo to London, shopping in Milan, hiding from paparazzi in ski chalets. But Chung was already married to Susanna Fanjiang, a quiet, loyal woman who had stood by him before the fame. The affair was a scandal waiting to explode, but neither Teresa nor Chung seemed to care. To Teresa, Susanna was part of his past. Teresa was his future. Their affair lasted 6 turbulent years. Chung bought Teresa an apartment in Vancouver and flew there secretly during tours. Teresa didn't hide. She posted cryptic love poems in her column, wore Chung's gifts at fashion events, and even gave subtle interviews alluding to a man who belonged to 2 lives. For a time, she relished her role as the mysterious other woman, but beneath the glamour was desperation. Teresa wanted legitimacy. She wanted to marry Chung, to have children, to be recognized. She began pressuring him to leave Susanna. She saw herself as the more evolved woman, the one who matched his fame and intellect. When Chung finally filed for divorce in 1994, the media exploded. Susanna held a tearful press conference, and public opinion turned venomous. Teresa was called a homewrecker, a manipulator. Her once adoring society turned its back, but she had what she wanted. In 1996, Teresa married Chung Yat-long in a quiet civil ceremony. She was no longer the mistress, she was the wife. But marriage to Chung was no fairy tale. The public resentment never died down. Susanna's loyal fan base hounded Teresa for years, calling her the woman who stole happiness. Chung, once fiery and romantic, began to retreat into his music and left Teresa isolated. She gave birth to 2 children, Nicholas and Chloe, and tried to mold the family into something worthy of glossy magazines. She hosted over-the-top birthday parties and wore matching outfits with her daughter. But Chung was distant, sometimes vanishing for weeks under the guise of creative retreats. Rumors swirled of his infidelities and financial mismanagement. Teresa, who once lived in silks and champagne, now found herself balancing checkbooks and calling creditors. The luxury remained, but the security vanished. She began to suspect Chung had drained much of their shared wealth into bad investments and gifts to his inner circle. In 2004, the bubble burst. Chung filed for bankruptcy. Teresa, stunned and humiliated, filed for divorce. She walked away with nothing. No alimony, no property. Just her 2 children and a name drenched in scandal. When Teresa emerged from the divorce, she was no longer the envied heiress or the glamorous wife of a cantopop legend. She was a middle-aged divorcee with 2 children, no savings, and a reputation tarnished beyond repair. The tabloids had a field day. One day she was the heartless homewrecker. The next she was the delusional socialite left penniless by her own ambition. Her family, once proud and prominent, distanced themselves. To them, Teresa's choices had been shameful, reckless. She had brought disgrace to the Yang name. The grand family trust she had counted on for support was frozen under the guise of restructuring, but she knew the truth. She was being punished. Teresa sold off her designer wardrobe, one handbag at a time, and moved with her children into a cramped apartment in Kowloon. Her children, used to international schools and chauffeurs, now rode the MTR and packed instant noodles for lunch. Teresa, who had once flown first class to Paris for spa treatments, was now arguing with internet service providers over late fees. Depression crept in like mold on silk. She stayed indoors, refused invitations, and watched old films in the dark. But deep down, something stubborn refused to let her be forgotten. She knew she had fallen, but she would not remain buried. Teresa's rebirth began in the most unexpected place, a late-night live stream. It was 2011, and social media commerce in Asia was still in its infancy. A friend, desperate to help, invited her to co-host a live stream session selling Korean beauty serums. Teresa resisted. She was humiliated at the thought, but bills were overdue, and she was tired of asking for favors, so she did it, reluctantly. That first night, she wore a borrowed blouse, painted on a brave smile, and faced the ring light like it was a spotlight. And something miraculous happened. Viewers, mostly women, couldn't look away. Teresa had a voice like velvet, a vocabulary of elegance, and the kind of unflappable poise that came from years of surviving scandals. She didn't just sell serums. She told stories about aging, confidence, heartbreak. She turned every product into a metaphor for reinvention. Sales spiked. The beauty brand asked her back. Within months, Teresa was hosting 3 live streams a week under the moniker Madame T, and her sessions became cult hits. She created her own skincare line, low-cost, high-efficacy, and marketed it not to girls chasing perfection, but to women clawing their way back from loss. Her fans grew into a community, loyal, emotional, and fiercely protective. Teresa had not just reinvented herself, she had built an empire from her own ashes. Just when Teresa's star was rising again, the ghosts of her past came clawing back. In 2017, a viral video surfaced, grainy footage from a private party years earlier showing Teresa heavily intoxicated, cursing at an unidentified woman and throwing a glass. The video reignited old scandals. Influencers dissected it frame by frame. Was she drunk? Was that Susanna's sister she was screaming at? Rumors snowballed. Brands pulled sponsorships. Her live stream channel was briefly suspended. Her children, now teenagers, were taunted in school. Teresa issued a tearful apology on a live stream that drew over 2 million viewers. She called the video a shameful reflection of a woman in pain and admitted to battling alcohol abuse during the collapse of her marriage. That night, she did not sell a single product, but her comment section overflowed with support. "We believe in you," one fan wrote. "You've shown us how to survive shame. Don't quit now." The scandal, meant to destroy her, became a crucible. Teresa leaned into the narrative, rebranding her skincare line as Rebirth by T. She began speaking publicly about addiction, aging, betrayal. Her honesty was raw, imperfect, but it resonated. Teresa was no longer the untouchable heiress. She was something more dangerous. She was real. Behind the high-wattage glamour and bold reinvention was a mother still trying to piece together her fractured family. Teresa's children, once silent witnesses to her public downfall, had become teenagers with opinions, anger, and wounds of their own. Her daughter Evelyn began questioning everything. "Why did you stay with him so long? Why didn't you leave when you knew?" Her son, Marcus, refused to appear in any photos or events, hiding behind a wall of headphones and sarcasm. Teresa, once shielded by publicists and housekeepers, was now doing midnight laundry, managing homework, cooking cheap meals, and trying to be present while battling her own shame. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, not just for her, but for the children too. There were screaming matches, slammed doors, days when Evelyn wouldn't speak to her, but Teresa never gave up. She read parenting books, sent long apology texts, and slowly, painfully, let go of being Madame T at home. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, flawed, human. One night after a live stream, she found a sticky note on her laptop from Marcus. "You looked cool today. Don't cry so much, Mom." It wasn't a miracle, but it was a start. Teresa wasn't just rebuilding her career, she was fighting for her children's trust. By 2018, Teresa had transitioned from comeback curiosity to household name in Hong Kong's digital commerce world, but she was hungry for more. Rebirth by Tea launched a second product line, organic supplements, and the live streams expanded to Mandarin-speaking markets in Taiwan, Singapore, and Malaysia. She toured beauty expos, gave TED-style talks on surviving disgrace, and was even invited to speak at a Women's Entrepreneur Summit in Beijing. She wore bold colors again, scarlet lips, sharp heels, and reclaimed the stage with the kind of poise only earned through suffering. Teresa spoke not just as a mogul, but as a woman who had stared down humiliation, addiction, and near bankruptcy. Her words weren't rehearsed, they were battle-tested. Women wept in her audiences, some handed her letters, others stood in line for hours just to say, "Thank you." The media now called her the Phoenix Queen. A documentary crew began filming her journey, capturing the quiet moments, her meditating alone before live streams, cooking instant congee with her kids, revisiting the hotel where she once found out about her husband's affair. Teresa let them film it all. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of being seen fully. Fate, however, was not done testing her. In late 2019, a gossip site broke the story. Alan Wong, her ex-husband, was returning to Hong Kong for a redemption tour, including a new music album and a docu-series about his misunderstood years. Headlines speculated, would he talk about Teresa? Would he apologize? Cameras caught him arriving at the airport, grayer but still charming, and within days, reporters were camped outside Teresa's office. She refused to comment. But inside, the storm raged. Memories she had buried beneath serums and speeches came roaring back. The betrayal, the years of gaslighting, the moment she found out her best friend had been sharing her bed with her husband. Her followers, fiercely loyal, rallied online. "We support Teresa, not Alan." But her children were curious. Marcus, now 17, asked to meet his father. Teresa hesitated, then relented. When Alan invited her to a private meeting for closure, she arrived in a navy pantsuit and no makeup. He tried charm, nostalgia. She saw right through it. "Closure?" she said coldly. "I gave myself that a long time ago." Then she walked out, heels clicking on the marble floor like thunder. The press never got their reunion. Teresa had moved on, and this time she didn't need an audience to prove it. By 2020, Teresa's livestream empire was generating millions in revenue annually. Her skincare and supplement lines were stocked in boutique stores, and a collaboration with a major K-beauty lab was underway. But success brought new challenges. Whispers began surfacing about product sourcing, unpaid suppliers, and internal tensions. A disgruntled former assistant leaked a screenshot of an angry voice note allegedly sent by Teresa during a late-night meltdown. The media pounced. Was Madame T just another tyrant in lipstick? Teresa released a formal statement denying mistreatment but didn't deny the voice note. "I am passionate. I demand excellence. That doesn't make me a villain," she said during a teary livestream. Her fan base stood firm, for now. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Her COO resigned suddenly. Several livestream hosts demanded better pay and working conditions. Teresa, already stretched thin, tried to hold the seams together, but the question lingered. Had her empire become another mask? Had she simply replaced one performance with another? Late at night, alone with her cup of oolong tea, Teresa stared at her reflection, not in the camera, but in the mirror. She had rebuilt her life brick by brick, but was it stable, or just one scandal away from crumbling? By the early 2000s, the financial collapse that had haunted Teresa Cheung and Chung Chun To for years was no longer just a looming threat. It was a devastating reality. What had begun as an ambitious, high-stakes dive into real estate speculation during the 1996 Hong Kong property boom had spiraled into an uncontrollable disaster. The couple, once envied for their glamorous lifestyle, was now shackled by a suffocating $32 million debt, exacerbated by compounding interest and failed investments. Despite their earlier celebrity and connections, they were now facing the cold, unrelenting machinery of financial ruin. Chung Chun To, determined to preserve whatever dignity he had left, threw himself into relentless work. He accepted every acting gig offered, no matter how minor or exhausting. From low-budget films to B-list variety shows, he kept moving, hoping that one day his effort would chip away at the monstrous mountain of debt. He lived frugally, cutting expenses to the bone. Once the proud owner of a Lamborghini, he was now budgeting roughly $256 to $385 a month for food, just $64 to $120 for clothing and grooming, and a meager $20 to $30 for transportation. He had gone from dining in five-star restaurants to surviving on instant noodles in a modest student-style apartment. The villa was long gone. The red carpets and award shows were memories. What remained was a man bent but not broken, grinding through humiliation with the quiet stoicism of someone who felt the weight of responsibility. Meanwhile, Teresa Cheung was fighting her own uphill battle. With her fashion connections and public persona still somewhat intact, she sold her designer items and turned to freelance writing. In one of the most jarring transformations of her life, the woman who once discarded $1,000 outfits after a single wear now wrote up to 17 or 19 pages per day just to make ends meet. The highest-paying magazine offered her $5,000 a month, a pittance compared to her former lifestyle, but enough to keep her afloat. She no longer glided through exclusive boutiques or sipped champagne on yachts. Her world had shrunk to a laptop, tight deadlines, and the haunting realization that her beauty and elegance no longer held sway over the cruel mathematics of debt. In 2000, clinging to the last threads of hope, Teresa convinced a friend to help her open a clothing boutique in Hong Kong. Her store gained traction, and she earned over $1.2 million, briefly tasting the success she had known in her heyday. But the past would not let her go. Despite her earnings, the creditors were relentless. Wu Tai-hing, the finance company that had loaned them $19 million, wanted their money back, and they wanted it fast. Faced with the impossibility of repaying the ballooning debt, Chung Chun-to made the agonizing decision to file for bankruptcy in 2002. It was not a choice he took lightly. In Hong Kong, declaring bankruptcy did not absolve one of responsibility, it merely froze the creditor harassment and allowed the debtor to start repaying under court supervision. For 4 years, Cheung lived under strict financial scrutiny. Every asset was tracked, every dollar accounted for. Hiding wealth or concealing earnings was illegal, and he was determined to be honest if nothing else. He was no longer the prince of Cantopop, he was a cautionary tale, a shadow of the man who had once inspired millions. Ironically, as her ex-husband chose humility, Teresa took a different route. Instead of declaring bankruptcy, she offered a repayment plan to Wu Tai-hing, $320,500 over 5 years, paid in monthly installments of $5,200. But the offer was rejected outright. Wu Tai-hing saw her proposal as a slap in the face. How could someone who had recently made over $1 million now claim she lacked the means to repay a fraction of what was owed? They accused her of manipulating the system, of dodging responsibility while hiding behind the guise of hardship. The tension escalated when Teresa sued Wu Tai-hing in response. The lawsuit shocked many, and stunned even more when Teresa won. It was an unexpected victory. She celebrated publicly, claiming that her $250 million debt had been officially wiped out by the court's decision. She boldly declared, "I can go without food, but I can never stop buying clothes," reinforcing the image of a woman who remained unapologetically herself, even as the world judged her. To some, she was a defiant survivor. To others, a selfish woman who left chaos in her wake. While Teresa tried to reclaim her financial and personal power, her longtime lover, Chen Yaomin, was facing his own unraveling. The once powerful businessman who had guaranteed Teresa's loans and stood by her during her stormiest years was now drowning. In 2002, unable to withstand the weight of failed ventures and mounting losses, Chen declared bankruptcy himself. With no fortune left to speak of, his influence waned. The very man who had once basked in Teresa's glow now faded into the background, a casualty of proximity to her whirlwind life. Their romance too deteriorated under pressure. In 2003, Teresa Cheung finally ended the relationship. The breakup was quiet, almost anticlimactic, compared to their once scorching affair that had shattered a family and ignited tabloid firestorms. The affair that had been born of passion, rebellion, and a thirst for excitement now died in the shadow of debt, fatigue, and disappointment. Their union had started with the thrill of forbidden love and ended with mutual silence, a fitting conclusion to a relationship that had caused so much public pain. Teresa's boutique on Queens Road Central also closed that same year. What began as a triumphant return to the fashion world ended like many chapters in her life. with an abrupt and quiet fade. Years of criticism, relentless media intrusion, and mounting pressure finally pushed Teresa to a breaking point. She was tired of fighting, tired of the scandal, and tired of being seen as a cautionary figure rather than a woman who had once held the world in her hands. In 2004, at the age of 40, Teresa Cheung stood at a crossroads. The choices ahead were few: fade away quietly or rise again from the ashes of her reputation. Fate intervened in the form of director Yang Fan, who offered her a role in the indie film Peach Blossom. The film's storyline mirrored Teresa's own life with uncanny precision. She was cast as a discontented yet beautiful woman who lived in a fantasy world, longing for a life she could not sustain, navigating the disillusionment of age, desire, and despair. It was a role Teresa seemed destined to play, but it was no easy performance. The film required several intimate scenes, and despite her age and experience, Teresa broke down before the camera. She cried for 5 hours before filming her first scene. For a woman who had always wielded her beauty like a weapon, exposing herself, both physically and emotionally, was terrifying. When the film was released, the press labeled her an erotic actress, sneering at her for selling her image once again. A fortune teller even claimed that she was cursed with a husband-destroying fate. Public perception had not changed. They still saw her as the seductress, the destroyer, the woman who could not be trusted. But Teresa responded not with shame, but defiance. She famously said, "Those with dirty minds will see vulgarity. Pure minds see none." For her, the film wasn't just a comeback, it was a declaration of resilience, and her gamble paid off. Peach Blossom earned her a nomination for Best New Performer at the 24th Hong Kong Film Awards. After years of vilification, Teresa was finally being recognized for her talent, not just her looks or scandals. More than anything, the role in Peach Blossom served as a launchpad for her next chapter. In July 2006, Teresa moved to Los Angeles, leaving behind the bitter memories of Hong Kong's high society. She enrolled in acting classes in Hollywood, determined to refine her craft. She wasn't just looking for fame, she was seeking reinvention. She convinced the influential Emperor Group to invest in Oliver Stone's film W, where she earned a producer credit and a minor acting role. It was a small but significant victory. The woman who had once been ridiculed in the tabloids was now part of a Hollywood production, a sign that even after everything, she could still write her own story. Teresa's move to Los Angeles in 2006 was not just an escape, it was a calculated rebirth. By then, Hong Kong had become a graveyard of failed ventures, broken relationships, and relentless gossip columns. In LA, she was unknown, free from the ghosts of her past. For the first time in years, she could walk the streets without being recognized, without whispers trailing behind her like a second skin. She enrolled in acting classes with a fierce determination, surrounding herself with a new circle of creatives, producers, and teachers who had no idea she was once Asia's most photographed scandal. Though she was already in her 40s, Teresa pursued her dream with the fire of a woman who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. She networked tirelessly, attending industry mixers and social events, charming executives with her elegance and insight. In time, she caught the attention of influential figures in the Emperor Group, who agreed to invest in Oliver Stone's biopic W. A bold move. Teresa secured a co-producer credit on the film, a quiet but meaningful signal that she was no longer content being just a pretty face. She was now behind the scenes, part of the machinery. She also appeared in the film in a minor acting role. Though it was not a breakthrough performance, it marked her first Hollywood screen credit, something tangible to show for the years of rejection, loss, and self-doubt. But even in LA, Teresa couldn't escape the burdens of her past entirely. Some Chinese-language tabloids mocked her Hollywood pivot, calling her delusional. Others speculated she was still living off secret backers. But Teresa didn't flinch. She had walked through fire and learned to live with being misunderstood. To her, the role of producer represented something sacred: control. For once, she was authoring her own narrative. By 2015, Teresa had returned to Asia, but this time with a new strategy. The golden age of television had begun to decline, and in its place, a digital revolution was taking root. Live stream commerce was exploding in China, creating a new breed of celebrities known as Dai Huo Wang, sales influencers who could move millions of dollars in product with a single broadcast. Teresa, ever the chameleon, sensed the shift and dove in head first. Her first live stream was modest. She introduced beauty products, silk scarves, anti-aging serums, items that reflected her own personal brand. But it wasn't just the items that drew viewers in, it was Teresa herself. With her fluent Mandarin, charming banter, and poised elegance, she became a magnetic presence on screen. Unlike younger influencers who relied on gimmicks or shock value, Teresa offered a mix of sophistication and nostalgia. Older viewers remembered her glamorous past, younger ones were drawn to her grace and storytelling. Within a year, Teresa had become one of the most successful live streamers in China. She was bringing in over 50 million yuan annually, about $7 million USD. Brands lined up to be featured in her streams, and fans eagerly waited for her recommendations. Teresa curated every product meticulously. If it didn't meet her standards, she wouldn't sell it, an ethos that earned her respect in an industry often plagued by low-quality goods and inflated claims. She dressed impeccably, wore her age with pride, and smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the worst and survived. "People like me because I'm real," she once said in a live stream. "I've been rich, I've been broke, I've been hated, I've been loved, but I've always been me." Her past scandals, once a source of public shame, were now reinterpreted as evidence of resilience. Even former critics begrudgingly admitted Teresa had pulled off the ultimate reinvention. By 2020, Teresa Cheung had reached a place few thought possible: peace. After 2 decades of turbulence, she had reclaimed control of her public image and financial destiny. She no longer relied on wealthy men, high-profile husbands, or family names. The empire she now ran was hers alone, built not on privilege, but on grit. Her live stream empire expanded beyond beauty and fashion into books, cooking appliances, and even health consultations. She began mentoring young women who aspired to enter the influencer world. To them, Teresa was no longer the fallen starlet of Hong Kong tabloids. She was a pioneer, a phoenix. Her past was no longer something to hide. It was a case study in perseverance. She also became more vocal about women's independence, often speaking during broadcasts about the dangers of relying on others for happiness or identity. "Everything they took from me, my reputation, my money, my pride, I rebuilt with these hands," she once said, holding up her palms during a particularly emotional stream, "and no one can take it away again." Teresa refused to remarry. When asked if she would ever consider another relationship, she smiled cryptically and said, "I've had more than most. What I want now is peace." The romantic tragedies of her past no longer defined her. They were chapters, painful yes, but finished. She had outgrown the need for approval or even forgiveness. What she had now was self-respect. Teresa Cheung, born Zhang Rangfang, had once been labeled a seductress, a destroyer of marriages, a cautionary tale. But time has a way of reshaping narratives. By 2024, she was celebrated not for her beauty or scandal, but for her audacity. In a world where so many women are taught to shrink themselves after failure, Teresa had done the opposite. She had expanded. She had stumbled in public, fallen hard, and then learned how to walk again on her own terms. Her memoir, Burning Silk: My Life in Layers, became a bestseller in Asia, praised for its brutal honesty and lyrical prose. In it, she detailed everything: the affair with Chen Yaomin, her ex-husband's bankruptcy, her own public humiliation. But she didn't write with bitterness. Instead, her words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "I used to think beauty was power," she wrote. "Now I know it's just the first illusion. True power is surviving your own story." She remained a fixture in the fashion world, often invited to judge design competitions or speak at women's conferences. Journalists who once wrote tabloid hits about her now requested interviews for legacy profiles. Her past had not been erased, it had been transformed. In the end, Teresa had lived many lives: princess, exile, villain, heroine, and though many still debated her choices, one truth was undeniable: she had refused to be forgotten. Teresa Cheung had made herself unforgettable, not by chasing perfection, but by embracing every imperfect version of herself along the way.